Hello YouTube! Today we're going to talk about histogram. What is it, why do you need it, and how do you use it? So a histogram is that thing. Specifically, it's the graph that shows you where all of the highlights, midtones, and shadows are in your image. So on the right side of a histogram, that shows you how many pixels are highlight pixels. On the middle, you see how many pixels are midtone pixels, and on the left, you see how many pixels are shadow pixels. Now, why is this important? Well, you can't always rely on the LCD screen of your camera to be an accurate representation. Oftentimes, you have your brightness set up on the LCD screen, which by its own nature is backlit, so that what you see on the screen is going to be brighter than what your camera sensor is actually exposing for. So how do you actually read this thing and put it into practice? Well, on the right side, it shows you how many pixels in your image are highlights. In the middle, it shows you the midtones, and on the left side, it shows you how many pixels are shadows. So this graph is a visual representation of your exposure, or what your camera thinks is an accurate exposure. This is a relatively properly exposed image. So what you should have is a mountain in the middle with very little pixels on the far end of either side. Now, let's underexpose this image and I can show you what that looks like. So this image is severely underexposed. What you have now is a cliff on the shadow side. So all of your pixels are down here. So that means you're losing detail. Anywhere you're not getting that mountain action in the middle, you're gonna lose those pixels and you won't be able to recover them in post. Likewise, if I overexpose the image, now this image is too bright and you should see a cliff on the other side, on the highlight side. You're losing all of the detail on that highlight and you won't be able to bring those pixels back. Now, bring it back to center. So a properly exposed image on your histogram should give you relative mountain in the middle without those spikes on the highlight or shadow side of the detail. To put this in practice to some real photography, let's go back to the studio and I'll show you some sample images that I pulled up. Here's an image that's clearly overexposed. When you talk about not being able to recover detail, this is what you're talking about. When you have a large cliff like this, you cannot just darken the image to get those white areas back. You're just never going to get it because the camera did not capture that detail in the first place. So that is why we want to avoid these cliffs at all costs. Another photo from this shoot was darker. So this was actually the image that the LCD screen, to me while I was out shooting in the field, looked accurate. But again, there was sun glare on it. It's very hard to see. The LCD screen is backlit. And so I took one look at the histogram and said, that is not right. That is not what I'm going for. We brightened it up a little bit and here is the finished image. We got those humps right in the middle and detail range going all throughout that histogram. So let's take a look at this landscape image. This is one that I shot in Iceland, and it is the classic example of the perfectly exposed histogram. You have this nice hump where the bulk of the image lies, and then you have the gradual fall off to either side with very minimal cliffs on either the shadow or highlight side. Moving to an image that's a little more chaotic, we have this wedding image. This wedding image was taken in bright sunlight. So you have a white dress in bright sun, and parts of this image are going to blow out, namely probably right here in some of these folds, right here in the hair, right here on the dress. You're getting some detail loss. Likewise, on the other side, here in the trees, here in some of the jackets and dark dress, you're losing detail on the shadow side. But looking at this histogram, you can see that this is as good as you are going to get in very harsh, contrasty conditions where the bulk of the image is all throughout the middle here, and you don't have spikes on either the shadow or highlight side of the image. So how can you take the histogram and use it for best effect? So here is an image that I did during a family shoot of someone's puppy. And so to get this, you underexpose the image, which means that in the background, all of these trees and stuff are going to push those cliffs to the side. But by underexposing the image to get that nice deep blue sky color and then using a flash, here you have the mountain of detail that is this corgi right here. So you still have those mountains of details in the middle of the image, even though there is a cliff. That is not the subject, and part of that comes down to intentional choice. So here's a couple more histograms that look different but are both accurate to the subject. So this wedding image, it is a lighter skinned person and shot with a large majority of sky. So this is actually the hump here where you have all of the subject detail, and then all of this is the sky and blown out detail, but it is still a properly exposed image for what I was going for. A very similar image, but instead of a white dress, we have a black tux, and the couple is a little bit darker skinned. Now we still have that same hump in the middle of the histogram. It's just shifted down the scale, and we still have that bright blowout of the background, but it is properly exposed for the subject. So part of this is deciding as a photographer, looking at the subject and deciding where on my histogram should the detail be. If you want more info on this, I do talk a little bit about it in my video, The Meter is a Moron, where I shoot out in snow. There will be a link to that in the iCard. Moving on to another image. This one, it was an artistic decision to be high key, completely blow out the dress to match the background. She's actually backlit standing directly in front of a softbox. So lots of white, lots of blown out detail, but again, the key images detail, we have the hump here on the histogram and here. So we have those mountains of details in the middle. Similar but opposite to this image, we have a low-key image where, yes, you have a lot of black that is losing detail, but we have the detail where we want it, and all of those light grays coming up to about 2/3 to 3/4 of the image. So that's how you use a histogram and how you put it into practice, and when to ignore it for best effect. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. This video was actually filmed on my SwitchPod. I will be giving that a review coming up next. There will be a link down to that in the description for part 1, where I unbox, and part 2, where you have the whole review. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.